Sinners Part 2. So another thing that I found interesting was the conversation between Smoke and Annie when he was talking about power and how he had only ever seen power correlated with money. He said that he didn't really believe in mojos and magic and witchcraft and all that stuff, but at the same time, he never took that mojo off. He wore it for 7 years. Now, this could be because it made him feel close to Annie, and maybe he indirectly believed in that stuff because he believed in her. But it was interesting to me that he said that because it was literally money that led everybody to their death. Because if you think about it, anybody who was incentivized to show up to the juke joint because they were being paid, they either ended up a vampire, which is the undead, or they ended up straight up dead. Mary, with her octoroon face ass, ended up a vampire because she went out there trying to appeal to them using her white privilege, ended up getting bit, and it was all about money. You know, she was out there trying to get money to give to Stack. Stack's the one who sent her out there, so he was also incentivized by money. He ended up a vampire. Cornbread showed up because he was getting paid. He ended up a vampire. Delta Slim, we don't know if he died or became a vampire or both, but either way, he had one of those fates. He showed up for money and alcohol, but he was also someone who sacrificed himself, so there may have been a different outcome for him. I'm still not too sure because we didn't actually get to see that part. We just saw him get attacked after, cutting his wrist. What's their other the Chows? They showed up for money. They were the ones selling the fish and making the signs. They were getting paid, so they were incentivized by money as well. They ended up a vampire and dead. The only people who didn't suffer that specific fate that we know of was Annie and Sammy, because they both showed up out of love. Annie showed up because she loved Smoke. It wasn't about money, because remember, she said his money had blood on it and she didn't even want it when he tried to give it to her for nothing. And Sammy didn't die at all. Nothing happened to him. Now, Annie did end up dying, but she died only in the physical because spiritually she was very much alive, which we saw at the end. But it was literally the love of money that was the root of all evil that led all of them to their demise, whether that was in literal sense or the undead. Another thing that I found interesting, and I think everybody's still going back and forth about this, was why the protections didn't work for the baby, because the baby ended up dying. Now, for one, we don't know enough about the baby's circumstances to kind of put that part together, because there's a little blank there. We don't know if it was a stillborn, we don't know if it was a miscarriage, or if it was a baby that actually came to term and then died. But the baby dying doesn't mean that the protections didn't work, because it could have been that the protection she put on Smoke is what kept the baby from actually having its life, because the way that he was moving, that baby would have been a vulnerability to him, and somebody probably would have targeted that kid, and that could have disrupted the protections that she put on Smoke. That's one idea. But my other one is that that part was allegorical for a generational curse. And I say that because we learned a little bit about the family dynamics of the twins, and we got to break that down a little bit. So we know that their father was abusive to Stack in particular, but we also know that their mother died while giving birth to Stack, which could have been the reason that the father resented him and beat him more than he did Smoke. But at the same time, the father was also a musician like Sammy is. Now remember, the guitar that Sammy has belonged to their father. So that leads me to believe that either he had the same gift as Sammy or he was compelled by that same divine purpose, which was to pursue music. So losing his wife instantly made him a single father, which probably caused him to resent Stack because he could no longer go out and pursue his dreams because now he had to take care of these kids on his own. Now, in reference to the generational curse aspect of that, we have to remember that Smoke actually killed his father because he was beating Stack. And there's always going to be a price to pay for taking a life. And I think that in a generational sense, the universe is going to get its lick back when you kill somebody of your own bloodline. So maybe Smoke didn't have the chance to be a father because he ended his own father's life. So basically, the cycle just repeated itself. Now we got to get into the character of Remick, because Remick, in my opinion, was an allegory for colonization in and of itself. And I say that because the way that he moved was very true to the nature of a colonizer, and portraying him as a vampire, vampires being of a parasitic nature, that's exactly how colonialism worked. And that's exactly how indoctrination works. And I'm going to break that down. So as we saw, Remick spoke a bit about his history and how he was basically colonized, because we know that the Irish have a very similar history to Black people, and that's something that Irish Americans like to weaponize against us while they totally negate the fact that they still live in white privilege as of today. So their history doesn't affect them the way that our history affects us because we're still living under the same stigmas, whereas they've kind of taken on and assimilated to whiteness. And that's what this was. It was forced assimilation. Now, Remick took his approach a little bit differently because he didn't immediately force people to kind of take on his ways or immediately infect them. He tried to play on their vulnerabilities first. And we saw that when he went to the Klansman's house. He tried to act as if the Choctaw were chasing him, as if he was being persecuted, but they were really chasing him because they knew what he was. And they even tried to warn his people, hey, whoever you welcome to your house is not a good person. They didn't want to hear it because they were racist as fuck, and quite frankly, racism makes you blind and stupid. But in the true nature of a colonizer, getting back to Remick, he wanted to covet Sammy's gift. That's what he wanted. He wanted the ability to feel, because Black people, one thing we're tapped into is the soul. And that's the one thing that these people have still never been able to take from us. They still don't understand how we thrive and how we exist. And this was very true to that. And depicting them as white, I mean, that was kind of on the nose, but at the same time, it was necessary to kind of tell the story. And if you remember, after he started infecting everybody and they took on this collective consciousness, that was when he became invigorated, because he was able to channel their memories, their stories, their feelings, their emotions. And he was actually like exhilarated. Like, there was a scene where they're all out there doing that Irish Crip walk together and stuff, and they're dancing together outside the building, and he's just overtaken with, I guess, satisfaction from having everybody's feelings that he can tap into, because they now share this collective consciousness. And that's very true to the way that religion has been indoctrinated into us. They present it as a form of love, as a form of freedom, as a form of salvation. And if you're willing to accept it, then yeah, you get to join the cult. There's going to be a little bit of a sacrifice there, but you get to join. And now you have this community of people who are still leading you and still controlling you, but they're doing it under the guise of religious freedom. And that's not what it is. And that's exactly how he was doing it. He created a whole vampire cult that he was the head of, even though he had been colonized, and he didn't appreciate that when it happened to his people. But he was very manipulative. It wasn't traditional vampire lore in that sense, because he didn't just bite them. He tried to appeal to them first, like how he did with Mary. I can see that you're hurting or whatever. And even with Sammy, he wanted to make his way in. He wanted the invite. But either way, he was still going to overtake you. And that's the way that religion was presented to our people. It was presented as if it was an option. But if it wasn't, you're going to hell. And basically, he gave them the same options. I also think that there was a direct correlation between Remick and Sammy's father. It kind of gave me the whole angel on one shoulder, devil on the other one, because they both wanted to covet Sammy's gifts. Now, the father's intentions may have been more pure, because he wanted him to use it for the church, but it was still to amass a following in the church. He wanted him to use that gift for his purpose, for whatever was going to be pleasing to him. And Remick wanted it for the same reason. He wanted it because it would have given him the ability to tap into his ancestry. And he said it, I want your stories, I want your song. He literally wanted to covet his gifts. And if Sammy wasn't going to give it to him, he was going to take it from him. Dang, y'all, I'm at 7 minutes again. I did have a couple more points, but I'm going to end it here because I'm tired of talking. Love y'all.